I don't know if I've ever met anybody who had the ability to sit down with a CEO from an international corporation, to a farmer, to a gunslinger, to, I mean, you name it. Dan was comfortable with everybody, and I think that's because he had great respect for people regardless of where they come from, what they're wearing, and that's really something we all ought to strive for, right? In preparing for this, the thing that I thought most about were some of the things that I like to do with Dan. Whenever there was sort of a crazy news story, and there was probably 4 or 5 that came up. If you recall, there was an individual that perhaps had a little bit too much to drink and climbed the Ravenna flagpole and had to be talked down. Well, the next morning I had photoshopped Dan's face on that photo of the person at the top of the tower. He loved that. I mean, we circulated all over the place, and we did that. There was somebody drove into a building and I put Dan's truck there. There was a bank robbery that had a video, pretty, sketchy looking. We put Dan's face on that one too. He appreciated that. I mean, I think he understood that if we're kidding you, it means we love you, And I think one of his favorites was I took the time to actually do a pretty nice Photoshop job where we put him on the cover of Rolling Stone. And so he said he finally made the cover of the Rolling Stone with playing his guitar, and that's how I'll always remember Dan. It's all those moments in between the work. The work was fantastic, but to me, the stuff that I'll walk away with are those private moments, those personal moments, and he's irreplaceable. Work is not nearly as important as it used to be. It's not as much fun as it used to be, and that's very much because Dan brought a lightness to the work that was a gift, and it's hard to replace.
Arriving in 2008, Dan Smith was kind of the unseen guy that everyone was talking about. At least as far as I was concerned, he was unseen. And the conversations were always consistent: optimistic, dedicated, and a get things done kind of guy. And I had the good fortune shortly thereafter to meet him and start working with him. And you could see immediately his commitment, his dedication, and his real sense of pride to making certain that everything was done and done well. We were talking at that time about something that seemingly was insurmountable, that being a major reinvestment in the city and the university, and a partnership that was going to take a lot of depth, and certainly he brought that depth to the partnership. He's inspiring, and many, many times throughout the periods that we worked, we'd run into things that would potentially be stumbling blocks, and he, along with Dave, were very, very certain to make sure that those didn't become stumbling blocks. I've said many times there's 1,000 ways something can't succeed, and only one way that it can. And he made certain that we got past all of those things, those thousands, that could stand in the way of getting it done. That's kind of the professional Dan. Then the more I worked with Dan, the more I became, I guess, an admirer and a friend. He, the consummate family man. He committed to his wife and 2 daughters. Spoke of them often, and he spoke of them with sincerity and love. And Dan is and has been a friend. We will miss Dan. There's an empty spot at the table where Dan was, and it'll never be filled with anybody like Dan. So to his family, thank you for sharing him with us. He's been a great help, a great friend, and he's been tremendous inspiration to getting everything done that's been done. So thank you very, very much. Our hearts will always be with you, and we will miss him forever.
A lot of people know Dan because of the high regard he held as the Economic Development Coordinator for the City of Kent. But I'd like to share a side of Dan that is not as well publicized. Dan was a longtime valued member of the board at Kent Social Services. He was under no obligation to be on the board. He chose to be on the board because Dan cared about everybody in Kent, no matter what their economic status. On a more personal level, I'd like to share my enjoyment and absolute love of watching Dan play with the flip-flops. You could just see his joy in living and his spirit of playfulness when he performed.
Dan touched many people's lives in so many different ways. First and foremost, Dan loved his family. He loved the city of Kent. And finally, I will always remember Dan for his commitment to community service, to Rotary, and as past Rotary president, he led us through a lot of great challenges last year, and we will always appreciate what he did for Rotary and the city of Kent. One of the things that I will most miss about Dan is his love of having fun with people. Dan loved people. He always wanted to help people. Every time he and I talked, he had a way of uplifting you and making your day much better than it started out, because Dan was a positive person that had a great influence on my life and the lives of others. He was fun, and you just loved to be around Dan, and he always wanted to help you have a good day and to help you be a better person. That's what I will miss the most about Dan. I love that man a lot.
Working with Dan was always a pleasurable experience, even if we were dealing with a tough issue. I always look forward to meeting with Dan. He brought to the meeting energy, enthusiasm, collaboration. At times he would tell me, Lang, we need to have this person involved, and with a smile on his face. And the thing that impressed me about Dan was he always championed the win-win. What is it good for us? What's good for you? We'll do this, and we need to have these people involved. And I remember that many, many times. And I can recall calling Dan on the phone and said, Dan, how are we going to, we really need to reinstitute the homecoming parade. And Dan said, and he chuckled on the phone. He said, well, let's get together for lunch. And we talked about it and came up with some ideas. And first thing we knew, we had a nice parade. And Dan involved the right people from the city, and we had the right people from the athletic department and Kent State University. And it was always like that with Dan, and it was just such a pleasurable experience working with Dan on various committees, whether it's an economic project or whether it's an athletic, how to really get the community involved in our programs. Dan had such a positive attitude, and let's get at it and let's get it done. The thing I'll miss about Dan was that he was a very creative problem solver. And Dan never had in his vocabulary the word problem. He would use the word challenge. And we would go to work in that perspective and say, no, we can do this. We can do this. And I never heard him say, you know, I don't think we can do this. It was always, we can do this. He comes across as a beautiful family. Missy, the girls, Dan, just an outstanding family, and see them together many, many times at functions, the Heritage Festival around town. It was just a delight to see him. And the thing I will always remember about Dan is that I never saw him not smiling. And even if it's a tough, knotty issue we're dealing with, he sees a little humor in it. And his sense of humor would always come through, sometimes a little sarcastic, but it was there. And I will miss that.
I was the chamber president, and he was the director of the chamber. But I had known him earlier because I was on the board, and he was still the director. And I enjoyed it We had already talked about some goals. Many of them we thought will never take place, but we thought we'll do that, talk about it anyway. He was the one who never hesitated to talk about goals, no matter how lofty they were. He wanted to do it. He wanted to do community service, no matter what it took. He was not looking to do anything else. And I enjoyed working with anybody who wanted to do something for the community, because this was my adopted town, as he knew. And we used to talk about various things which can be done, knowing fully well that it is just a dream. But we didn't mind talking about our dreams. And interestingly enough, as you know today, those dreams are realities. I enjoyed working with him because, as I mentioned earlier, he had the same goals as I had. It was nice to talk to him about these, because he never said, "Oh my God, what are you talking about?" He, not only that, but he said, "Yeah, that's good, let's go with it." Working with him, smiles on his face, always saying, "Let's go," never concerned about, "Oh, maybe this will not work." You know, there are two kinds of people, as Dan and I noticed and worked with it. Some who say, "Why you want to do it?" Others say, "Why not?" And he was one of those people, "Why not?" No matter what I said as the chamber president, he said, "Why not? We'll do it, Tian." So it really, not only it was good to talk to somebody who says, "Yes, we'll do it," but the fact was he worked on it. It was difficult not to be in a good mood when you are with him. He's a positive person. You may go there with any negative thing on your mind. Within a few minutes, he'll change it, and you come out positive from there. That, I think, is a quality which not too many people have. I only wish he was with us a little longer, but I suppose somewhere up there, the people needed him to redo their goals, so they wanted Dan.
I work with a company called Fairmount Properties. I'm here on behalf of our company's owners, employees, and investors. We were a part of the downtown redevelopment project, and really since early 2008, we have very fond memories of being with Dan in the trenches, negotiating all of the transactional documents, putting the planning together. So the time that we spent with Dan, we'll always have fond memories. A big reason that this project was successful, I think, is because of the can-do attitude that Dan always exemplified. There were many times when this project probably could have gone off the rails, and that steadfast commitment to the vision that Dan and his colleagues at the city kept is a big reason why we're all sitting here today, enjoying the fruits of those labors and seeing the transformation that downtown has become.
Dan and I first started working together in 2011, and it happened as a result of another dear friend and colleague getting diagnosed with cancer, our former director, Gary. A week before we broke ground on what everybody sees now, Dan and I were thrown together to work together, figure out how we were going to get this project out of the ground and do it in a way that nobody was aware of all the struggles and issues we had behind the scene. I used to joke with Dan that he was the front of the house guy and I was the back of the house, that he would get people to the table and then I would work on getting the details structured. Dan was funny. I can get so immersed in the seriousness of my job that he was always that reminder that we need to step back sometimes and take life a little lightly. I never had him call me or me call him with him not answering the phone, Mr. Wonderful, what can I do for you? And ending the phone with Dano checking out. He reminds me that we can take something horrible and embrace it. He accepted what happened to him with so much, I don't even know how to explain it. I was in awe at the way that he handled this so courageously. And his humor never left him. As the cancer progressed, he still worked. And those of us closest to him were the only ones that really noticed some of the gaps in his thoughts and stuff. But he still held his own out there so well. You would talk to him, and then later on I'd talk to him that same day, and he's like, did we talk? Making fun of himself. And he continued doing that all the way to the end. I'm going to miss him. And he is irreplaceable. And all I can hope is that his message of taking life and remembering the good and setting aside the bad stays with me.
I had the privilege of meeting Dan Smith back in 2003 when I moved to Kent and started my business. He was very charming and persuasive, and you just couldn't tell Dan no when he asked you something. He also had a very irritating way of being always happy and always smiling. But Dan and I forged a friendship based on that from the very beginning. And then when I became the executive director in '09, he was one of the first people that stepped up and said, you know, hey, congratulations, let's do lunch, anything you need. And I pretty much had Dan on speed dial for when anybody ever called the chamber office and needed some help that we weren't able to give them there in the office. I will miss his friendship. I will miss his smile and his ability to find a positive in just about every situation. I told him when he told me the news from the get-go that if anybody could beat this, it would be him, because he was the most non-compliant human being that I'd ever met. But I will miss him terribly, and the chamber and the city and the community overall has a lasting void without Dan Smith being a part of it.
Well, professionally, you know, Dan has been a charismatic leader throughout the community, and to me as well. I met him 15, 20 years ago when I was a student at Kent State. He was still in the hotel industry. Came in and spoke to our major, one of our classes, and afterwards he asked me if I really wanted to go this route after hearing him talk. Well, I think hearing him talk made me want to go that route even more, just because he was Dan. I mean, that was the way it was. You know, it was quite an honor to find out that he was a Rotarian, as my family's been a Rotarian for 4 generations. Got to work with him with different events. He really drove me to help set up an event, or bring us downtown to work on the International Fest and start getting us back into the community spotlight. So, you know, that's what Dan's done for me. He's kind of helped push me forward. Always positive, always, you know, full-hearted in anything he did. But he never, anytime there was a job to be done, it never felt like he was trying to force you into it or anything like that. It was, you know, you actually wanted to do it. He never steered anybody to a job that wasn't meant for them. So, or to any event or anything like that. He always steered you to where he thought you fit the best. And again, it just goes back to being a leader. And that's truly what Dan was. You know, the thing I'm going to miss about Dan is, you know, he was a person that he may have met you once. You may think that he didn't even know your name after he walked away, but he walks up and he'll always greet you with your name. You know, and he always greet you like you were his best friend. You know, and I think that, among many other things, is probably what I'll miss the most. I think a couple years ago at Brimfest, his last performance at Brimfest with his daughter, I think that's the one thing that I will remember from forever, because I just remember how happy they both were to be up on that stage. And it was an inspiration, you know, it made me go home and hug my kids. So.
First and foremost, I felt very honored and flattered that of all the people he could have asked, Dan asked me to be the program chair while he was president of Rotary, knowing that that would put me in sequence for becoming president this year. And I think I learned a great deal from him in terms of just the positive energy, his casual way of going about really handling a lot of things, but doing it very effectively. That's what really comes to my mind. Reflecting back on many conversations with Dan, I just don't remember him having anything negative to say about anything. You know? So it was not just what he said, but also just part of him, part of that wonderful, positive, we can do this sort of energy that was just natural to him. There's a couple of memories that I really treasure, and one is that I can remember, and this happened on a number of occasions, that Dan would lean over to me at the table at a Rotary lunch, looking out over the room with a lot of pride and say, I just can't believe what the people in this room do for this community. And I know that Rotary meant a great deal to Dan because of that, and because he really also believed in and was aligned personally, I think, with the philosophy and goals of Rotary, service above self. And he demonstrated that by, I think, going above and beyond the bare bones minimum of what he had to do as president. I can't believe, looking back, that as busy a person as he was, between his work and his music and his personal life, that Dan, on a number of occasions, took time out of his schedule to attend district events and meetings. And because of that, he really is remembered in this district. I think, you know, again, just what a positive person he was. And what I think he was a person of true joy, you know, and I think even through the experience of his illness, he exhibited that, a lot of courage, a lot of joy in, you know, a really devastating process. That's an amazing person.